Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of a Recovery Talk. This week, I am joined by fellow eating disorder recovery coach Stephanie. Stephanie actually works with me over at Let's Recover, and she has lived experience having recovered from an eating disorder herself. This conversation is about finding full recovery and breaking free from diet culture. I hope you find this conversation inspiring and interesting, and let's get into it. Hi, Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. So maybe you can start by introducing yourself, who you are, what you do, maybe talk a little bit about how you came to do what you're doing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's pretty exciting to be here. I'm Stephanie. I'm 31 years old, almost 32 in a few weeks. And I live in Belgium with my partner and our senior dog. And why I'm here for about I think 15 or 16 years. I've been struggling with an eating disorder myself. Most of that was in a quasi-recovery state where I wasn't fully aware of full life and full freedom you can experience other than that. And next to that, I struggled with orthorexia, anorexia, bulimia, and also a lot of compulsive movement. And then, I fell back. The last time I fell back in quite severe episode of my eating disorder, where I felt very anxious and obsessed more than ever before. But luckily, I found that feeling of suffering was greater than my fears. And I tried, I gave full recovery a chance, and I choose to start working on full recovery, mostly with help of online accounts, group programs, that helped me get through it. And now I can say that I'm fully recovered now for several years already. And I'm very grateful every day, especially on those little moments where you realize that you can do things that weren't so spontaneous or so normal in your eating during the eating disorder. Then you feel once how difficult and overwhelming it was and how normal it can be and is now. So I also started appreciating life much more after recovery. Then I took a distance from all the accounts and eating disorder recovery content. But after that, I felt I still wanted to help people that are still fighting the struggle. So I started for volunteer work with people with eating disorders. And then I also thought about I want to coach people in eating disorder recovery to help people the way that other coaches have helped me in my own journey. And so, now I'm been coaching as an eating disorder recovery coach for several months already. And I'm very grateful that I can do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing your story. And I'm, of course, so happy to have you as part of the Let's Recover team as well. So I'm a little bit curious to hear from your perspective. So I know this is something me and you have spoken about, but maybe sharing a bit with our audience as well. What are some of the mindset shifts that you had to make in order to reach full recovery from quasi-recovery?
Yeah. The first thing I remember was accepting that diet culture is there, and then that diets don't work. Also, I remember the first book in my recovery was a book called the Fuck It Diet or so, and it was a book that was helpful for me because it has a little bit of a humoristic approach, and it helps to set those first steps, but also especially making the mind shift that to not let the fear freeze me to take actions, because before I started my recovery journey after a long time of quasi-recovery also, I didn't really know how fears worked or how I actually made my fears worse or bigger by not taking the actions that were giving me the fears. So it was making the shift realizing that having those fears is like your indicator to do the things that feel so wrong, and to know that it's normal to feel the discomfort and the stress and the anxiety. Yeah, that helped me through it.
Yeah, that is such an important reframe. Sorry, I'm sitting in like the most loud, squeaky old chair. So sorry to the listeners if you hear me like squeaking around. I'm sitting in like a really vintage chair here. I think this is what you mentioned there is such an important point. Like, in order to reach full recovery, you're going to have to really reframe how you view fear, right? Because fear, when you feel it, it's essentially your body and every part of you telling you avoid, avoid, avoid. So then by listening to that, you're going to take steps away from recovery. But actually reaching full recovery, you're going to have to really reframe it and instead see fear as a signal of the opposite. Instead, see fear as a sign like, hey, I need to walk towards this thing that scares me instead of avoiding everything that scares me. And that's such an important reframe shift as well. So you mentioned the diet culture aspects of having to like almost break up with diet culture. And I would love to hear a bit more about that for our listeners. Like, what are some steps that you had to take to get to the point where you were broken up with diet culture?
Yeah, I remember reading a lot about it, reading like helpful content, so not diet content, but like recovery content that was helpful. Listen to podcasts and watching vlogs about it, just learning that, yeah, diet culture will always be there, but there are also a lot of different kind of diets, and everyone says like something else that would work or so. So actually, when you think about it rationally, then it doesn't make a lot of sense, I think. What was very important in the journey for me was also reading about how when you have this genetic predisposition for an eating disorder, then you can kind of see it like an allergy to diets and or like an addiction. So that was also very important for me to know, actually, to break up with diet culture for good, to realize that it's not healthy for anyone, I think, but it sure wasn't healthy for me in that case.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love what you said there about how diets, like, they never agree. One diet will be like, oh, you can't eat any meat. And then the other one is like, no, meat is actually the only thing you should eat. Like, they can never agree. And it can be so confusing navigating the world with an eating disorder and navigating the world with that exclusion mindset, the mindset of constantly trying to find other things to exclude in terms of food, to a point where you've excluded so much that you're really orthorexic and really limited. And it starts having adverse consequences for your mental, physical, and also your social health. Yeah, I think it's a good reframe to kind of look at diets as something that you're allergic to if you have a restrictive eating disorder. Like you said, it's not necessarily something we would recommend for anyone. We know that diets it's something like a 94% failure rate or something like that. Like, it's a very inefficient way to live long term. You tend to gain the weight back, often with extra. Like, we know all of these things, but for someone with a restrictive eating disorder, dieting is especially harmful because you have that genetic predisposition to react very abnormally when there is an energetic deficit, where it's almost like you have an addictive reaction to being in an energetic deficit. I tend to call this the switch, and I've done a podcast episode about this in the past. But maybe you want to talk a bit about your experiences with the so-called switch, like essentially realizing that you're reacting a bit abnormally to being in an energetic deficit and getting out of that loop.
Yeah, because I didn't hear of the switch before in my early eating disorder when it started. But then afterwards I heard like your podcast, and I could really like make the link. Like, I've been in long time in like quasi-recovery state where I still had a lot of like strict eating disorder rules, but it wasn't quite visible, or it was more like mentally draining. But I realized when I started to restrict a lot again, that I really felt like becoming more anxious and more strict to myself. very quickly, actually. Although it wasn't initially my goal to lose weight or to look different. It was more like looking for a way to cope with certain things that were going on back then. And somewhere I knew I remembered these behaviors coming back because I recognize them from my first episode with eating disorder when I restrict a lot. So I did notice or recognize some of them, but still I went through because that was my way of coping back then. And I felt like there was this moment that I really told myself, like, I shouldn't go and stand on the scale again because I know this will make something click in my mind, that then I would go back. Like, I want to have that rush of seeing the number go down and I want more and more. And I knew that it would never be enough because I recognized it from years before. But still, you're in that restrictive state and the anxiety is building up. And then, there's this one moment that you do step on the scale and it has like a short term, it gives you like this short term rush or something or high. And then, then you're back in that negative loop again.
Exactly. It's the addictive component of it, right? And I think it's an interesting point that you mentioned, that it's not necessarily that you were like explicitly like, I am going to go and I'm going to lose weight right now, right? And I think this is often sometimes I see in regards to like orthorexia, in regards to wellness culture. It doesn't always begin in a way of I'm going to now go lose weight and this is what I'm doing. Instead of be like, I just want to be healthy, right? I just want to make some good lifestyle choices. And please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong about wanting to be healthy and wanting to make choices that are good for your body and your brain. That's fine. But what I'm saying is that so often it starts under this hidden agenda of like, oh, it's about health. And then when you start like unpicking the layers, you start realizing that, oh, it's like an onion, and you start picking off the layers of the onion. And then suddenly you see what's inside and it's like, eating disorder diet culture. And I think this is just a very important thing to get forward, because I see so many people who are in denial about the fact that this is their eating disorder. And I see this a lot in people who maybe have had an eating disorder in the past, and then they think they're recovered, but they are kind of in quasi-recovery, and then they slide backwards and they're like, no, I'm over this whole eating disorder thing. When actually they still are sliding back into old habits, but it's just under a different branding almost.
Yeah. And I also remember, like, in recovery, I started like a little bit plan and steady, and then going to like all in. And then there I had like the mindset, okay, so diets don't work. I don't do diets anymore. There's no healthy, unhealthy. And then I remember like being in recovery already quite some time, like half a year or 8 months, but I wasn't fully there yet. But then I felt like the eating disorder coming back a little bit, or like telling me, you still need to be careful, and trying to get back in, like with this sneaky thoughts, and that I was like in a state, okay, maybe I can go for recovery, but still need to be careful. What those coaches are saying is not entirely true. You have healthy and unhealthy foods and things like it. But then I'm glad that I pushed through. So even though it felt like I was fully there, I wasn't fully there yet. Yeah. So I think it's important to always push a little bit further to reach that full recovery state also.
Absolutely. And you spoke a little bit about this in the beginning of like having those moments when you are like realizing, wow, I'm doing something now that I couldn't do before, or having moments like, oh, I'm feeling a certain sense of freedom that the old version of me wouldn't feel. And I think maybe we can dig a bit more into that. Like, as someone who had an eating disorder for a very long time, is it 16, 14 years?
Yeah, 15 years, 16
15 years. Yeah. Around that. That's a long time with an eating disorder. So I'm curious to hear a bit about what were some of the reasons why you decided, like, I want to get out of quasi-recovery, I want to pursue full recovery, and what are some of the benefits that you have experienced from that?
Yeah, I think I went from like quasi-recovery to full-blown anorexic state again, I think. And then I realized I was thinking about the future and thinking about the things I wanted to do. Yeah, when I would be fully recovered, and that was like experiencing the food freedom and not like having to plan my meals every time, or planning my exercise, or like panic when my exercise plans couldn't happen. Those kind of stuff.
Also, what is it that made you realize that, okay, no, I want to get out of quasi-recovery? Did you have like a moment that made you realize it, or was it more like an accumulation of several things that made you realize that, no, I have to make a change here?
Yeah, I think it was more like an accumulation. It were like several moments, because on one hand, I remember like, especially in the nights, that you're like very, very anxious. And then when you're laying in bed and you start to think about it, I was quite scared about the future, because you're in that state of restricting, and you're anxious, and you know very well that it won't ever be good enough. So you are wondering like, what is the end point here, and how is it going further? So then I was like very anxious all the time. Those were like several moments, and then they build up, and then you also see like all the things that you can't do while being in the eating disorder, also knowing how things were better before, even if that was in like a quasi-recovery state. Yeah, like I know how my relationship was before anorexia, my relationship with my partner, and I knew the things that we could do. And I couldn't do that anymore. Yeah, it wasn't like a nice life anymore. Not for me, not for my partner. Also seeing like my environment worrying about me. Of course, you need to be motivated yourself, but that kind of like helped me to go for recovery.
Yeah, I think that environment worrying is such an interesting one, because I think that it's interesting because on one hand, that can really motivate people towards recovery. Then also sometimes people can be scared that if they recover, they won't get the same compassion and care and quote unquote worry. But what I always make clear to people is that, you want to come to a point where you don't feel like I want other people to worry about me, because there's like, you don't want, like, I'm thinking for myself, if I had people around me that were constantly worried about my food and my body and my movement, I would be like, this is just annoying. I don't want this kind of care. You want to come to a point where there's a different kind of care that you need and desire, right? So I think that's just an interesting one. Sometimes I see that even in the same person, they can be like, I want to recover so that, my parents stop being so concerned. But also, what if I recover and they're no longer concerned? And I think this is an interesting one, because it's that thing of like, you can never win with an eating disorder, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had the same feeling. And that's also, you never be like fully motivated to start recovery. That's also why I find it difficult to like say, oh, this is what made me like going for recovery, because it like changes every day and every hour of the day sometimes. So it's always difficult to say like what made you like fully go for recovery.
Yeah, I think this is one. I think sometimes when people have fully recovered, other people expect there to be some very grandiose answer as to what made you realize that you're going to have to make a change, right? So I know I asked you that, but also part of it was, to see that sometimes it is not like a massive moment of I was in the hospital and I was about to die. A lot of times it is just like an accumulation of misery, an accumulation of this is just becoming very inconvenient, right? And it's interesting because people with eating disorders, they often can tell, they always find 100 reasons why recovery is inconvenient at this very moment. It's like, oh, but it fits so badly with my studies and work to do recovery now. I don't really feel ready. Like it's just, is an eating disorder ever convenient, right?
Mm-hmm.
An eating disorder is a constant logistical issue that's just messing things up. And it's just that coming to the point of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. That was my experience as well. It was just like, I'm just fed up. Like, it's not giving. It's
Mm-hmm.
not giving. I don't want to do this anymore. But it is that thing of, still, even when you reach the point where you're really fed up, it's completely normal to have elements of, oh my God, is this really the right thing to do recovery? Like, should I step back? Should I hold on? That is also a normal part of the experience, to feel that ambivalence, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So another thing that I thought could be interesting for us to discuss is, the whole thing and the narrative that I often hear around full recovery not being possible, and that once an eating disorder, always an eating disorder, and like, you'll never fully get rid of it. I hear this so many times, and unfortunately I sometimes hear it in like more like eating disorder, like awareness kind of a way, where people say, oh, I recovered from eating disorder, but you can never really fully recover. It's always going to be there. Everyone knows that it's always going to be there. I hear that one a lot, and I'm like, we don't. Like, no. And what I do agree with is that if you have had an eating disorder, you're always going to have a vulnerability towards, like, for example, going on a diet that probably is not going to be safe for you. It's kind of what we spoke about, that you're going to have to be like, no, I can't diet. Like, I'm out of that yo-yoing cycle. No, not for me. But you actually can fully recover, but you're always going to have a genetic predisposition that you're going to have to be aware of. But you can actually reach full recovery, and not only reach full recovery, you may find that because you're stepping away from diet culture, you may be in a better place than a lot of other people without eating disorders who maybe are a little bit engaging in diet culture here and there. So I want to hear a bit of your thoughts around this whole thing that full recovery is not possible, especially from someone like you yourself who've had an eating disorder for a very long time.
Yeah, I think, what you just said, that's actually also how I experienced it. Like, and what I think, like, full recovery is possible. I think like every journey is different for everyone, but I believe that full recovery is indeed possible. You will always have like that genetic predisposition that makes that you, like, diets are like an addiction to you, or like an allergy. So it's about knowing your triggers and discovering like what are healthy coping mechanisms to use in life, because life will always be unpredictable and there will always be like difficult moments. But I think full recovery is possible and stays possible when you like know what your triggers are, what your healthy coping mechanisms are, and like diets aren't a part of that anymore. And so knowing that, and knowing that because of your predisposition, that's the case for you, that also helps, like you won't use that anymore. Of course, it's always like an active decision that you have to make, like are you going to use it or not? But that's why it's so important to in and after recovery to discover what works for you then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I remember this, at least, okay, this is more like my own lived experience, but I remember that when I was kind of freshly recovered, I still felt like I had to be very conscious of, whenever things felt unpredictable or stressful, not to go backwards. I had to be like, no, that is in the past. I'm not going there anymore. But I've noticed now, as someone who's been recovered for over 10 years, when I have stressful things going on in my life, I don't even think for a second, like, I should go back to my eating disorder. I don't want to make it seem like that is everyone's experience. I don't think that if you ever have thoughts and temptations of going back to your eating disorder, that means that you're not really recovered. I don't want to say that. What I'm saying is that, at least in my case, I actually don't feel tempted to go back there. But I remember when I was more fresh out of recovery, it still was like, it's almost like, because almost like it was more fresh in memory that's, it's more recent. But now it's like my brain doesn't actually really go there. And I think that's really interesting. It just shows the power of rewiring.
Yeah. And the more times that you go against it, or use those different things to handle things, the more spontaneous that it becomes also, that you're indeed not thinking about going back to the eating disorder or those behaviors. Yeah,
absolutely. So another last thing that I thought could be kind of building a bit upon what we spoke about is the narrative of recovery not being fully possible, and how sometimes, and again, I feel a little bit hesitant even saying this because I do not want anyone to feel discouraged from seeking out professional help. And I want to be very mindful of not demonizing eating disorder treatment as a system. I want to give criticism where criticism is due. I think that's important. And I think that criticism has actually helped change the system in a better direction over the last few years. But also one of the things that I unfortunately often see is within eating disorder treatment, even within eating disorder advocacy, there sometimes is the same narrative of you learn to live with it, right?
Yeah, it's more like sometimes I hear people that are more like pessimistic, or I think that's a bit sad because when you talk about it like that, then it's also more difficult to get out of it. I think because how you speak to yourself is also has a lot of influence in the actions that you take then, and how you feel about it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like neither of us are saying that absolutely every person with an eating disorder will recover. We know that's not the case, but we're saying that if you enter recovery with the mindset that this is not really possible, then that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Instead, you're going to be like, hey, like, I don't even know if this is possible, but I'm going to give it my all and I'm going to try. And we do see that it absolutely is possible, but it does take a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it's very important and very rewarding work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I really enjoyed and appreciated this conversation. Could you maybe share where people can find you?
First on the Let's Recover website, I'm on there on the coaching page with you and Louisa. And next to that, I also have my Instagram account that's at the Wishful Coach. I think there's a punctuation in between. I don't know now.
Let me get it up. Yeah, the.wishful.coach on Instagram.
Yeah. I haven't posted that much lately, but I try to post every now and then something. But that's also where you can find me.
Yeah, I'll just give a bit of a shout out to Stephanie's Instagram. It's really good. There's some really, really good posts there. So recommend even just going there and like reading it and think about it as like a library of good posts that Stephanie has a tendency to say the things that you really need to hear in the moment. So I would strongly recommend checking out Stephanie's Instagram, the.wishful.coach. And like Stephanie said, you can also find her on the Let's Recover website at letsrecover.co.uk. Stephanie is taking on new clients. I'm not sure at this very moment if you have spaces. You may have the space now, or there might be a little bit of a wait. But overall, if you are interested in working with Stephanie, you can head over to the website and you can book in for a free consultation to see if you're a fit. Of course, I'm very biased because I work with Stephanie at Let's Recover, but I think she's an excellent coach that I would feel very comfortable recommending to people who wants to work with someone who has lived experience, but also has good professional academic experience. I'm not sure if you mentioned it, Stephanie, but you are also a nurse, a mental health nurse. I think you glossed over that part.
I forget that sometimes because
forget that. Oh, by the way, I'm a mental health nurse.
It's far away.
Exactly. So I can absolutely recommend that as well. So thank you so much for coming on, Stephanie. This was a great conversation, and thank you for being open and sharing your own lived experience. I think that can really help people to hear as well.
Yeah, thank you. It was nice being here.
Links to Stephanie's Instagram will be put in the episode description for this episode, as will a link to the Let's Recover website. Thank you all for listening.